My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big.
You're tuned in to Faith City Outreach with Maria, the founder of Global Gospel Worship Radio. Maria interviews local Christian pastors, authors, musicians, and global leaders, sharing their testimonies and the servant work being done for the Lord. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus reminds us to seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. We hope this program will encourage you to do just that. Now here's your host, Maria.
Welcome to Faith City Outreach. This is Maria with today's special guests, Brian Doerksen and Marika Siewert. Brian has 3 JUNO album nominations, one in 2008, the second one in 2019, and the third one in 2020. Brian has a 30th anniversary album coming out. His new release song titled Father to Son will be released on Friday, September 13th of this year. Brian and Marika also released In Search Of, which is charting on Christian radio in Canada in spring 2024. Marika Siewert is an award-winning recording artist, songwriter, actor, and director based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Marika has been the special guest artist on the Come Now is the Time to Worship tour in 2024, which is this year, and with dates in the United States of America, UK, and Canada with Brian Doerksen. Brian and Marika have some Christmas concerts coming up too. Brian and his wife and family live in Abbotsford, British Columbia in Canada. Brian and Marika, thank you so much for being on Faith City Outreach today to share your musical travels and the work that the Lord is doing in your lives right now and on your upcoming worship tours.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. The difference you're making in the world in the music industry makes it evident to me that the Lord is at work in your lives. Thank you so much for living God's purpose and plan for your lives. I know that you are going to be on tour, or maybe you are already. Where has the Lord taken you on tour recently, and where is He going to be taking you in the near future?
Brian?
Well,
You start.
if we're talking 2024, early
Yes.
in the year, we did some events in California. Then we were in the UK in May as part of the Big Church festival there. Plus, we did a couple of solo or different events outside of the festival, which was special because the UK is where Marika grew up, and it's also where I lived for 2.5 years. And it was during that time, 25 years ago, that I wrote Come Now It's Time to Worship. So trip to the UK is always like going home, like a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did events across Canada in June. I did a couple of American events in the summer in Denver and in Cincinnati. And now we've got coming up events in British Columbia this month, events in Alberta, Saskatchewan next month. What else we got coming up, Marika?
So many things. Well, I do want to say that part of the reason we're doing this tour is because it is to celebrate the 25th anniversary of that incredible song. And a digital version of the album actually just got released a couple days ago, but it's been a pretty special tour. We have, what are we not doing, Brian? Okay, so we have obviously some Christmas tours, our Christmas concerts coming up. And also currently we're just editing a Christmas special that we're going to be doing a release for, hopefully on network television and also globally online, because Brian's audience goes far and wide. And Father's House I guess is the project I'm super excited about to release, because that's one of the albums. It was Brian's first solo album, but an album that really impacted my life as a young musician and artist, just kind of getting started even in my youth group church career. So that's coming soon, November 1st.
Yeah,
right? Wait, what's the date?
Oh my gosh.
We're in
30
September.
years.
I know.
30 years. Well, so the first single, Father to Son, comes out on September 13th. Then the second single, which is actually a duet with Marika and me, called There Must Be a Place, comes out on October the 11th. And then the full album, the remastered original album, comes out on November the 1st of this year. So yeah, it's quite a feeling, 30 years. And my special needs son, Benjamin, who inspired the writing of the song Father to Son a little over 30 years ago, is now in his early 30s. It was my first.
Wow.
I had, we had girl, boy in our 6 children, and this was my first first son. And, there's things that you experience and that you believe for and you hope for, and you start on this journey and you think you're going to end up at a certain place, and you end up at a different place. But the journey has been it's been wonderful. It's just different than I expected. And, with our son, he lives with Fragile X syndrome, so he has very limited speech and requires full-time support, but he can communicate in other ways. He can communicate with some phrases, but he communicates with some signs. But you just learn to get to know him, and you learn to know what makes him tick, and been a joy. But I didn't know that when I wrote the song. So singing that song now, 30 years later on this side of the journey, is it's like the same words carry a different resonance.
Does it carry also a different feeling, because this is a song that you're writing for your son, right?
Yeah, well, you're writing for your son because at that point, it's all potential.
Mm-hmm.
And, anything's possible and all of this. And now I sing those words, and it's true. There's still all this potential and anything's possible, but my son can't really comprehend the technical meaning of the phrases, but I think he can understand whether he's supported and whether he's loved and whether he's valued. And the point, it's interesting because, some of the lyrics in the song, son, when shadowy twilight falls across your way, every song you hear will whisper that my love is near. And it's like the intention of the song was, there's going to be some trouble in the world and in your life, but I'm here. I'm your father, and I'm here, and I'm with you. And so I hope and pray that he knows. Well, I know he knows that, but I can't have a kind of an intellectual conversation about that with him. I have to just share it with him in other ways.
I'm sure he senses the love that you are embracing him, both of you and your whole family.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus said too, in his word, that there are going to be trials and tribulations, but he is with us. He's our Father.
Yeah, we don't, the thing is, I mean, obviously sometimes some of the trials and tribulations that we go through are sometimes of our own making because we're foolish or
It's true.
Fill in the blanks. But most of them are not things that we choose or we sign up for. They just happen in a world like ours, to anybody, to everybody at any time. And so you said, like, those words of Jesus. What I appreciate about those words of Jesus is there's both comfort and there's honesty in them. I have a song called You Shine, where the pre-chorus goes, in this world we will have trouble, but you have overcome the world, inspired by those words of Jesus, right? So it's like, I like that it's that both truth, but it's also comfort in the truth,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when you wrote that song too, was it an emotional experience because that's for your son?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was. And it was a whole season of my life where I started to see what I call the father wound in culture, that everywhere you turned, almost you saw evidence of the father wound, fatherlessness, the fathers abandoning their children for their own convenience or for their own greed or for whatever, and not taking responsibility, all of those things. And I was feeling this stirring. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a faithful father. Of course, I'm human, so I was also aware I was going to fail. But I was trying to lean into that, and also lean into what it felt like was the heart of the gospel, which was Jesus saying, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And the essence of that was, you all have flawed parents, but God is, in essence, in a metaphorical way, the perfect parent who is faithful, who is with us. And I was leaning into that and both observing the need for it in culture, and then having two amazing daughters first, and then our first son. There's just a lot of emotion and a lot of hope wrapped up in that song.
Yes, and that's an important topic because as you were talking, I interview a lot of people, and there's always that topic that comes up, this fatherless nation or generation. And I can basically sympathize with that because I myself didn't have a father who was really involved in my life. But when I was led to Christ, I knew that he was the perfect father. And that just gave me comfort and it gave me love. So just share that with people who don't have a father, but who can be comforted knowing that he is the perfect father.
Yeah. And one other thing about this project was, so during that season, so I had my first son, but I became a big brother to a fatherless boy through a horrific tragedy that happened just down the road from our house. It was a fatal car crash, and this boy survived. He was but by this point he was fatherless. And so I kind of welcomed him into our family, and he became like a big brother to our girls and everything. But as I walked with him and got to know his situation, it was very different than mine because he didn't have loving parents. And the parents that he had at this point, a stepdad, and they fought all the time. There was violence in the home. And so it was like the combination of my experience with Adam and my experience with my own son, Benjamin, so even when I was singing, "Son, you are my treasure, son, love beyond measure fills my heart for you, my son." I was singing for my son, but I was also singing for a fatherless boy, Adam, that I had got to know, because I wanted him to experience that unconditional love through a human and through, hopefully, ultimately through the divine, so that when I couldn't be there for him, he could still reach out and know that he was loved. So when you said that, your experience, I remembered, oh yeah, and this was also what was going on in that season 30 years ago when I was launching this. And so the new version that's coming out, on September 13th, the new single, there's a couple of things interesting about it. One is the original version 30 years ago, I sound like a kid. Okay. I'm in my mid to late 20s. And so my voice just sounds young on the original. And now on the new version, I actually sound like a father, which just kind of gives me a chuckle. And the other fun thing about the new version is we arranged two cellos, one playing a lower part and one playing a higher part, to kind of represent a father and a son. And the way the cello parts weave in and out of each other, it's quite, if you think about that as a metaphor, that this cello parts are like a father and son, we're actually about to film a music video with two cellists. So the song will eventually, as soon as we can release it, it will be visual as well. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And what a precious story about you being a father to that fatherless boy. What has been your reaction so far from people, not only from your songs, but what you witness when you're on tour?
Marika, you're a little bit, you actually have a better perspective because you're doing some lead vocals and leading parts of the night, but as you're singing with me, you're observing what happens when people hear me singing my songs. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think honestly, that's probably one of my most favorite things actually about going on tour with Brian, because our families all got close during COVID when none of us were doing anything other than being together, which was actually kind of beautiful. And I know how much Brian's music has impacted people all over the world, but to see it firsthand on tour, Brian often goes back to the merchandise table after, and it's just lineups of people with stories, and sometimes he gets handed letters and the emails. And I think what's so special, first of all, is to have an artist it's an honor for me to just watch Brian do his thing and be a part of it. I think to see how much people are impacted by the music, by the lyrics, by Brian and his life. I'm learning even on this tour, Brian sharing more of his story, which a lot of people don't necessarily know, that his songs have been birthed out of these, very unique experiences. And a lot of them really open up a story of just a real a real faith, real challenges, like real grief, but real hope. And I think there's this element of people just really still relate to the music. So I get excited that we get to sing these songs that have been around for a long time, but I see them also kind of having new life again. And I think that is what's so special about doing this sort of anniversary tour, is we get to sing these, well-loved songs that people are now going, but I still love them. It wasn't like I loved them 30 years ago. Like I listen, I see a lot of the messages, and I help Brian with some of the social media. And so I get to see the reactions from people. And, I think as artists, to be able to just keep on inspiring people's lives, or just being there, having our music be there in their brokenness and their times of loss and hardship, and yet still have that element of faith. It's been really special to watch, because people are still showing up to the concerts and being there and singing the songs. And after a lot of years of not being able to do that because we couldn't even have concerts, it's a very special time to be out there again. And I'll keep getting Brian out there until he can't get out there anymore. I'll be wheeling him in the wheelchair like
oh my gosh.
Who was it? What was that on the Grammys? Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell, yes. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, honestly, one of the reasons I'm doing these concerts is because of Marika. Part of it was the COVID experience and some other things where you kind of feel like maybe it's time to wind this part of me down. And Marika comes along and says, And
so
then,
how did you meet?
Whoa, well, here's a fun story. So I was working on a musical,
which he does.
My second, so Father's House, we talked about the 30th anniversary.
Right.
That started as a series of songs, became a musical. Then my second musical, really on the similar theme, was based on Luke 15. There was a man who had two sons. And everybody talks about the prodigal son as if he's the lost one. But the whole point of the story is actually to show the lostness of the elder son. He's just lost in, legalistic other things and doesn't know the love of his father. So we were working on a second musical based on Luke 15. And me and my script writing partner, Christopher, created a new character, a young woman who the younger son falls in love with. And I was talking with a friend about this character, and they said, "Oh, I know exactly who could sing that role. Her name's Marika Siewert." And I went, "Oh, I've never heard of her." So then I looked her up and I heard some of her songs, and I went, "Oh my goodness, what a voice. This is perfect." Like I saw the picture, saw the voice, and then the friend said, "Well, here's her," whatever. I can't remember who called who first, but she did a audition. I had already basically picked her, that she was, we had several people audition for the role, but I knew it was Marika. But the thing was, as soon as she did that, we became fast friends, and now we're old friends, because that's been like, I'm going to say that's what, 17, 18 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny actually, because I never met Brian at the concert that I went to, but I remember going with my friend at the time who was working with their family, with their other special needs sons. And I said, if Brian ever releases Father's House again, I want to be on his marketing team. And I'm like, so it's actually kind of crazy and a little bit full circle that we're now now doing many years later. Yeah. And then, we recorded this new single together, but then we're also just working on the new version and the re-release of the album. So it's been a long game, but it's been such a beautiful journey. And so to be able to get it to do it together, and our families get to do it together as well. It's basically like our families go on tour. It's a pretty amazing season for us all, I think.
Is there a particular song where the Holy Spirit just moves greatly in the lives of people more than any other song? For whatever reason, he's choosing that.
Are you referring to our current touring events?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, it's so interesting. That question's very interesting to me, because the thing is, different songs on different nights at different times for different people seem to go click, and there's just life in this room, and there's this they ignite somehow, and you can feel it in the room, the connection happening. And my wife Joyce, who is traveling with us, which is always a somewhat heroic feat. She she's a very practical, earthy person who's very organized and has to not just help those things, but make sure that our home base with our special needs son who still lives with us is all organized. But one of her comments is when she's at these events, she'll deliberately sometimes move around to the side so she can see people's faces. And one of the things she describes is this feeling of like the light switching on or peace, or she can see people come in and they look troubled and they're carrying burdens and weight. And then she watches their faces and the change and the peace and the transformation that happens in the course of the evening as their burdens get lifted and as they just rest into the love that's there for them, that's unconditional. And so that's happening. And I think it's different songs on different nights for different people. Like for some people, we include a lament called How Long, based on Psalm 13. And they can't remember the last time they came into a church and were given permission to express their sadness and their grief. And that is just like life to them. They are just like, they kind of open up and they feel safe. And that's the song, when at the end they'll come up and talk to me and they'll say, oh, but when you sang How Long, O Lord, like I love all, but I finally felt you gave me permission to be real. So you have songs like that really resonate. And then you have songs like, I'm going to pick one of my oldies that Marika kind of dragged out of the
Talk about Light the
dusted
Fire again.
off. Yeah, I'm kicking and screaming a little bit,
Yes.
going, I don't know if I want to do this old song anymore. But she goes, no, we need to do Light the Fire again. So, and then you do a song like that, and you can just feel something in the room happen. It's like,
Wow.
it's kind of like it's a remembering.
Yeah.
Right? Because our God-given backup hard drive in our brain is connected to music. So when songs are important at one point in our life and then they're kind of shelved for a long time, when you hear them again and when you hear them from the person who wrote them, something can reawaken. I mean, I don't know, Marika, how would you answer that question?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think it's fair because you've written all these incredible songs that God moves on all the time. But I would say that I think you're actually redefining in our concerts how we allow God to move in our lives and what that looks like. I think in a very North American sort of worship culture, sometimes we'll put labels on how God is moving, what it looks like when God is moving. And something that I'm super proud of in our concerts is that we've really created a safe space that if people want to celebrate, they're free to celebrate. If they want to be on their knees, and cry, it's a safe place to do that. If they haven't stepped into a church in years because they don't like the culture anymore, but they resonate with Brian's songs from 20, 30 years ago, it's a place where everyone can be welcome. And we've been really purposeful with creating our concert experience around that because I think there is a lot of hype in worship and there's a lot of hype in culture that can absolutely be good. But there's a lot of it that can also be bad. And I think there's this authenticity for both Brian and I and Luke and Zoe, my daughter, who's on stage. And, we have Brian's dad, Harry, on a video screen. And we've been really purposeful with inclusion of all cultures, all ages, all ethnicities. And I think that's how the kingdom of God should look. So, that question is always a bit of a question, but I think we just let God be God because we get to just show up and do what we love. And it ends up being a pretty incredible evening everywhere we've gone. So,
and all these songs are timeless songs that you're bringing back. I mean, they will never end. It doesn't matter how old they are. So what a wonderful, beautiful time to bring back these songs and also calling it Come Now is the time to worship, because really it is the time to worship, especially now since we're coming to the new elections here in America, where there's going to be a new shift. We do not know what the next president is going to be, and there's so much tension in our world. But right now, we are experiencing, at least in America, we're feeling like our faith is being challenged and people are falling away from the Lord. What encouragement do you both have for people experiencing falling away from the Lord and encouraging them to return back to Him?
Well, one of the things I would talk about is to place more and more emphasis not on external religious behaviors and and things, but to go deep inside our hearts and to, we talk about and of course, Light the Fire Again, a song that Marika was encouraging me to sing, is really a song about first love, right? And it's about just being willing to let love reawaken love in us, not putting pressure on ourselves to self-generate it, to force it, but to put ourselves in places where we are experiencing deep unconditional love, and then letting that love reawaken our spiritual fire, if we will. It's like, I was thinking about this scripture in Isaiah 42 this morning. There's this beautiful moment and this prophetic word, I think, that is really about Jesus. And I remember in Isaiah 42, it says, it's describing, here is my servant, the chosen one, right? Which we believe is Jesus. And then it says he will not shout, right? He's not going to raise his voice. But here's this part about, we're talking about first love too. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. And I think there are a lot of people, I mean, everybody's a bruised reed in some way, okay? And they anticipate that if they get close to God, God will break them because God's angry. But instead, Jesus comes along and says, I'm going to show you what God's like. And he comes alongside those who are hurting, the bruised reeds of our world. But this other thing, a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. And again, I think religion is kind of like constantly judging people. Oh, you've lost your fire for God. Oh, you're doing this. Oh, we're always like that. But along comes Jesus and this word, and it's like, it doesn't matter how little warmth or flame you have. I believe almost everybody has something. There's something alive in them. And our job isn't to judge them. Our job is to love them and to see whatever that little ember is that's still alive in them be coaxed back. And we don't, we don't need everybody to be the same. We don't ever need everybody to believe the same. We don't need everybody to behave the same. We don't need everybody to look the same. What we need is diversity, but diversity with that first love flame inside that says, I'm made for a purpose and my life matters.
Yeah.
And anyway, I think that when I think of what's going on in culture, I just love those words in Isaiah 42. And we're not going to accomplish it by shouting and raising our voices and declaring how right we are and how wrong other people are. It's literally drawing alongside each other, because we're all bruised reeds and we're all smoldering wicks in a way, and just coaxing that life and love out of each other.
I mean,
Marika?
I echo everything Brian says. I think what I've realized in, my years, I guess, on this planet is that everybody's Jesus story looks very different. And so, this concept of falling away from the Lord, I think it's kind of a bit man-made, because you look at like the woman at the well, you look at any story in the Bible that Jesus was close with these people. He wasn't it wasn't like these people, they just may not have known him yet. And so I think there's something actually in people's dreams that lights that spark again, that brings people. I think it's some of that element of why people think they're falling away from the Lord. But I always tell people there's always someone waiting on the other side of your dream. What is that dream that you have in your heart since you were a kid to do? What is it that sparks your heart? And it's something I feel like that everybody has, whether they go to church or not. And I'd encourage people to just, I don't know, there's something very real about remembering what it's like to be a child and to dream and to know this unconditional love, whether it was that from your friends or a teacher that you really resonated with, or, a mentor growing up. But, again, I think that's why this Father's House special release is so special to me, because it's actually music and art like that can really bring people back to the heart of the Father. And I think it's just, being open to what love looks like again. And I think you can find that walking in the trees in a forest, or going to the ocean, or, I see it in my little Shiba puppy running around chasing a stick. I know it sounds crazy, but like you literally could see God all over that. So I think it's just, noticing, keeping your eyes open and hearing the whispers.
My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and
Thank you for listening to Global Gospel Worship Radio with Marina Maria, where all the nations praise the Lord with Christian international music and radio programs. We'd like to thank our major financial sponsors, Spectrum Insurance and Financial Group, for supporting our program, as well as our other media partners who make the broadcast of this show possible. If you'd like to donate to our radio ministry or to learn more about it, please go to globalgospelworshipradio.org. And finally, we hope you'll go with this blessing from Psalm 29:11. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. Thanks for listening.